This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Greetings, everyone. This is Z. Thomas. I'm the Executive Director for the State Board of Examiners for Long-Term Care Administrators, and I'm getting ready to start a state standards review for um, our state standards exams, and this will apply to all license types, all applicants. I'm going to break it out into, starting with this part one will be the board's rules and statutes, and then a little bit of testmanship at the beginning of that, and then we'll go into different parts of the uh, different parts of the test that different people have. The NHA candidates, which is primarily our AU candidates, um, you'll need to listen to all of the sections, every one of them. Our CAAs only need to listen to this section and the second 2A, I'll call it 2A, and then we'll have another section for RCAL, which is Residential Care and Assisted Living Administrators, 2B and 2C. You'll need to listen to the assisted living piece and the residential care piece, and the residential care administrator applicants will just need to listen to the residential care piece, which would be 2C. And then the fifth and final piece would be 2D, which would be adult daycare. So everybody listens to this section, and then whatever sections are applicable to you, all NHAs listen to the whole thing. Before I get started, I know a lot of people are apprehensive about taking a test. Some of you haven't taken one in a very, very long time, perhaps, and you just need a little refresher on some of this kind of stuff. It is a multiple choice test. All of these tests are, and it doesn't matter which one you are. They're multiple choice. You got 4 choices to make. So you've got 25% chance of getting it right if you don't know anything. Most people do pretty well on this test. It's not like the NAB test. That's a completely different animal. We're not even going to talk about it today. So anyway, when you're taking a test, just some things to remember while you're taking the test. Keywords such as may versus shall or must. Those are 2 completely different words, and you need to give those some respect as far as what they actually mean. Other things you need to think about is if you were writing this test, how would you write it? And if you were writing this test, you'd be looking for things you could write a good multiple choice question about. And that would include things such as something that has numbers in it, such as number of feet or how many pounds or those kinds of things. Numbers should stick out at you. Another thing that should stick out at you if you're writing the test is when you find that there's a difference between, say, nursing home requirement and assisted living requirement or residential care or adult daycare. Anything that's a difference, you can almost bet that the Board of Examiners will be asking that of the nursing home administrators because they're tested on all of them. But you can bet that if you're one of these other people taking the test, that those things would probably come up on your test as well because they're humans and they've written that question and they're not going to let it go to waste. So it's a good source for a question to happen. The other last thing I'd say about test taking is trust your instincts. Really trust your instincts. When you put a question down and you've answered it pick your choice and you go back and you're second guessing yourself, don't do that. Don't second guess yourself. Go back and leave that alone. You got an eraser on the end of the pencil that we give you. You do not have to use it. The other thing I want to say is, I've told people on day 1 of class, that this is a multiple choice test. It's done by paper in the class. And you have an option to take it at PSI at your own cost, different fee that you pay to them. But people are so uptight on the first day class, they don't seem to remember anything that I say on the first day of class by the time we get here. So I end up answering those questions again. So this is a paper and pencil test that's given right here in our conference room, unless you want to opt to pay a separate fee for AU students, or it's a higher fee also for anybody else that wants to go take it at PSI. So part one, we're going to go into Oklahoma Administrative Code 490, which is the board's rules, and it is chapters 1, 10, and 15. Chapter 1 addresses administrative operations, pretty much how the board runs, that sort of thing. Chapter 10 is really where the focus of administrators' issues are, and chapter 15 deals with the certified assistant administrators. And again, I've told you this before, but I don't know why that's not chapter 1, 2, and 3, and why it's 1, 10, and 15. I suppose that's a legislative issue, that why they do things the way they do, I don't know. So without any further ado, I would like to go on and get started with our review. I will be putting some slides up for you to kind of follow along, so you can kind of see where I'm at as we go. I'll start off in chapter 1 of OAC 490. That is the small book with the little plastic spine for most people. Some people that may have it just the front portion of your study packet if you bought one. Otherwise, it's OAC 490 if you want to go find it online and print your own, or just follow along online. Would recommend that you go through here and you highlight things as I go through them. Some of these things are not on the test. Some of them are. Some of them are just things that I think are important for you to know, and I'm just going to talk about it. So this is more than a review. It's and if you've not looked at this before, then it's not a review. That's your first viewing. That's probably not good. You should have reviewed this stuff before we're at this point, getting ready to do a review before the test. So anyway, we'll start in chapter 1. We'll start with the definitions. Those are on in paragraph 1-1-2. Definitions I'd point out to you to look at include administrator. And actually, anytime you see the word administrator pop out in this or in the health department rules or statutes as we go through those, anytime the administrator is singled out, you probably ought to be paying attention to what the administrator's responsibilities are in that issue. So you got administrator, you've got lapsed or expired license. Right now we are actually in the middle of renewing. This is in November when I'm recording this, and our renewals start at around the 1st of November, and we are required to have them finished by the December 31st. So the licensing year is another one. The licensing year is the calendar year, January 1st through December 31st of each year, and we renew around the 1st of November through the end of December. And if you're not renewed, then there's consequences that you have to pay to get through that. So I'm going to flip on over to 152. Talks about referrals, reports, and notifications. I actually had a whole class that talked about some of this stuff. Paragraph E there says if the individual making a report is a facility resident, resident's personal or legal representative, or a current employee of the facility, the board shall keep the individual's identity confidential. That's so that you don't retaliate against them and that sort of thing. The other thing to note here is above that in paragraph B, it says anonymous referrals or reports shall not be accepted. So if we don't tell you who it is, and it is one of these people, but otherwise we'll tell you who it is, but we do not accept anonymous reports. The health department does. So if there's someone reports an issue to the health department, then that is another issue, and you would not deal with us, you would deal with the health department on that survey. Flipping on over to 172, where we get into the schedule of fees. That's on page 13 in my book, if that helps you along. Page 14, paragraph U, talks about a late fee for failure to provide current contact or employment information. That's a $75 fee if you fail to tell us that you've moved, they're working in a different place, any of that kind of stuff. And we don't go around looking for this. This is more one of those things I tell you about that let you know that you're just required to tell us when you've changed jobs, when you've moved, all those kinds of things, so we can reach you. If we happen to send you a letter and it comes back undeliverable and we have to spend our time and effort to find out where did you move to, then we'll probably, when we get the letter that we were trying to get in your hands to begin with, you'll get a notice that you owe us $75 for this as well. But that is a requirement, and we'll go over that. I'll show you where that's at later as we go through this. Flipping on over to 1-9-1E, page 17 in my book. All programs approved by National Continuing Education Review Service, NCRS, NAB, that receives an NCRS NAB approval number will be presumptively accepted by the board for purposes of meeting Oklahoma's annual continuing education requirements. The continuing education, bottom line is your continuing education has to be approved by the Oklahoma board. And this is telling you that the Oklahoma board has in writing in this rule pre-approved NAB NCRS approved courses. Now, there are other courses that come up that come to the board directly for board approval specifically. But if you go to a NAB approved course, that's a course that you can attend. The other thing about these nowadays with the NAB CE registry that's out there, when you sign up for a course that's NAB approved, they should be asking you for that CE registry number. If they're not asking you for that number, that should be a red flag for you that they may not be a NAB approved course, and maybe that's not where you want to spend your time, because if you're trying to learn something, that's one thing. You can go to anything to learn it, and I applaud you for doing that. But you're not going to get credit for it for your CEUs if it's not NAB or board approved. So keep that in mind. But it has to be approved by this board or NAB, and this board presumptively has approved NAB courses. So moving along. Continuing education requirements on 1-9-4, page 20. Paragraph A says each licensee shall be responsible for identifying his own continuing education needs, taking the initiative in seeking continuing professional education activities to meet those needs, and integrating new knowledge and skills into his duties. What that basically says to you is you are responsible for going out and finding something to make yourself a better administrator. You know, there are a lot of courses that are offered out there that, because your facility belongs to this association or that association, something like that, then you can go to those conferences free and get that continuing education. That's not necessarily the best training that you're ever going to get. And maybe it's not something you should be doing. But maybe it is. But you know your own weaknesses. That's what this is saying. You know what your weaknesses are. Go find yourself a course to make yourself a better administrator. That's exactly what this is saying. Some states require you to get so many CEUs in ethics or some other thing, or this year it's this and that year it's another. Some states require that you get so many CEUs in person, so many CEUs online, or they limit one or the other. We don't do that. We tell you how many you're expected to get every year, and we put it on you to figure out how you're going to get them, online or in person, and which courses are yours that make you a better administrator, because all of you are different. You're none all the same. The following paragraphs in that paragraph 1-9-4 talk about prorated CEUs. So if you get your license and you're a nursing home administrator, you get your license in June, there are 6 months left in the year. So you would end up going into this thing and seeing that you are required 2 CEUs per month. That means you have to give 12 CEUs for that first year of your license. Every year after that, it's always 24. RCAL, it's 18. Res Care, it's 16. Adult daycare, it's 12. CAAs is also 24, just like the nursing home administrators. So you go into here and you see that it tells you what the prorated number is. You do not even have to do that. When you get your license, you get a letter that congratulates you and tells you a few things. If you read the letter, it tells you how many CEUs you are required to get that first year. But the issue here is, as you read this, for example, paragraph B2 talks about res care, newly licensed res care only administrators, and it says 1.3 hours per month. That does not mean that you have to go get 1.3 hours in July, 1.3 hours in August, 1.3 hours in September. That is a prorated number. So don't call us and say, I'm having a hard time finding a course that is 1.3 hours, so you just aren't out there. That is not what it means. So I'm just going to try to be clear that that's what this is a prorated number. The next piece is 1-9-5D. That talks about what happens if you are audited. And we are required to audit. We audit about 5 to 10% of every license type every year. And it says that if you're short in one of those audits, that you are going to be disciplined for that. The discipline that's standard for that is for the first time, is a $50 fine for each CEU you're short. The other part of that is that you get 2 CEUs assessed for each CEU you're short, and you end up paying attorney fees, and you end up paying for those courses as well. So let's just say for discussion that you're a nursing home administrator, you're audited, you haven't done any this year, so you're 24 hours short. That means that after that audit is complete, you're going to owe the board $50 for each of those 24. That's $1,200. Plus, you're going to owe 48 CEUs on top of the 24 for that following year. So you're going to have to get 72 CEUs that next year, and then pay the attorney fees on top of all that. And there's really no excuse not to get your CEUs. They're out there. They're online. We don't care what you get or how you get it. So you can get them online. People do it all the time. Don't fall into this trap. But the other part of that is that the second time around that it doubles. So it's $100 per CEU and twice as many CEUs as that first penalty. And the third time you would end up going before the board. And that's what that standard penalty says there in the rule at 195D. Moving right along into chapter 10. This is where you see the licensure requirements. The first part of this whole thing is talking about the licensure requirements, so you probably are familiar with what's required of you for your individual licenses. And I'm flipping all the way through this to, it's page 34 in my book. It's 10-1-11, requirements for restoration from suspended status. Paragraph C says, the board, in its sole discretion, may restore a suspended license after the suspended time has lapsed, upon submission of evidence satisfactory to board that the conditions for their suspension no longer exist and that no other reasons exist which warrant continued suspension. So they don't have to reinstate your license. It says they can, or they may, at their sole discretion, but you can't. The issue is here, don't even bother before that suspended time is up. If you're suspended for 6 months and at 3 months you say, oh, I got a job here, I could go do this. Let me see if the board will give me my license back. Don't even waste your time. They're not even going to hear your case until you've had your 6 months up or whatever the time is. May restore a suspended license after the suspension time has elapsed. That's the key that you need to have there. So moving into 10.3. 10.3.3D, state standards examinations. It's over on page 40 on mine. D, it says the board has determined the passing score for all state standards examinations to be 75% or greater and shall apply the standard uniformly to all persons taking the exam. So it's 75% regardless of which exam you're taking. If you're taking the nursing home administrator exam, for example, there are 100 questions on that exam. You have 1 hour. CAAs have 90 questions. 75% is still the passing score, but 90 questions, and they have an hour. Everybody else has 45 minutes, but the number of questions is 50, I think, for RCAL, 33 for ResCare. The number of questions varies by the different state standards exam that you're taking, but the passing score is 75%. This used to say that the board would set the score and apply it uniformly across the board for all examinations. It didn't say what that was. So to find that answer, what the board determined that to be, we had to go back into the minutes to find it. And we said, well, why don't we just put it in the rule? So that's what we eventually did. We put it in there to say this is exactly what the rule says. Moving along, 1035A1 talks about applying for your renewal, and it says you'll do that on the form and in the manner as prescribed by the board online prior to the expiration date of the current license. Paragraph C says it is the personal responsibility of each licensee to renew his license prior to the expiration date of the current license, and further to ensure that the information he provides for purposes of renewal is true and accurate. What I want to tell you about paragraph C there, which is at the bottom of page 41, if you're tracking with my book, it should be similar to it if it's not the same. It says it's your responsibility to renew your license. We do all we can to remind you. Pam, Ginger, call, the email. If we can't read your emails for you, we can't make you go renew. It is your responsibility. So if we do nothing for you, it's still your responsibility. But we think it's a pain to go through to get someone to renew their license after they've not renewed it. So we do our best to make sure that no one gets caught up in that trap. Because paragraph D there says, if the license is not renewed by the last day of the current licensing year, there's a late fee of $100 per week, which shall be assessed. It doesn't say it may be assessed, it says it shall be. And it flip on down to the bottom of that paragraph and it says, and you shall not hold a position or function in the capacity as a long-term care administrator in Oklahoma. So you're going to pay a late fee and you're going to not be able to work as an administrator because you don't have a valid license. That's what it boils down to. Now this $100 per week, I always like to talk about that a little bit because the first day you're late, January 1st, it's $100. January 7th, it's $100. January 8th, it's $200. January 15th, it's $300. How do we assess that fee? The board doesn't meet till, let's say, January 29th or 30th. That's your year, puts you into the 5th week. That's not the way we calculate it. We calculate it by the time that you pay it. And you go in and you renew the license online and you pay the late fee and the renewal fee. So you end up paying your renewal fee plus the late fee, whatever it is at the time you do it. And then you still have to go in front of the board and get your CEUs audited on top of all that. Explain to the board why you didn't renew, and then they would renew your license. So you're not going to get your license renewed usually that's the board meetings at the end of January, which gives people more time to get on that list of people who want to renew their license who just forgot. So yeah, because if we don't hear from you, then we vacate your license. It's one thing to have a lapsed license, but then the board actually reviews those at the January board meeting, and if you're not speaking up and saying, I want to renew this, then they vacate it, and you've got to start over pretty much for getting your license back, with most exception, well, the only exception being most of the time it's the NAB that you do not have to take. But no one wants to do any of all that stuff over again. So paragraph H there also says that if you practice after the expiration date, you're practicing without a license. I just told you that. And you're subject to disciplinary actions as determined by the board. That's what paragraph H says. And believe it or not, that does happen. We have people that say, well, I paid my renewal fee, but no, you didn't go through the process. The board does not renew it until the board meeting. And we tell these people this, but they choose not to listen. So it's better to renew early before you forget it. Okay, slipping over to 1053, I know I covered this in my AU class a lot about the different disciplinary actions that can be taken and how we get to these points. That paragraph B tells you who can be brought before the board. That does include applicants. It does include AITs. It does include people working without a license. We can take action against you, and there's a number of 27 things after that. You probably should be pretty familiar with those by now, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those. So next part we go into is 1013-1. That's skipping over a few pages in here because a lot of this is talking about preceptors and AITs, and that's something that comes later for some of you that want to do that kind of stuff, be a preceptor in the future. Subchapter 13 is standards for administrators, and paragraph 1 talks about the code of ethics, 13-1. Paragraph A says at the end of that, the last half of that says all long-term care administrators and AITs shall be encouraged to participate in their professional association, the American College of Healthcare Administrators, ACHCA, often referred to as the college, as a means of continually improving themselves as long-term care professionals and another source for CEUs. So when you get your license, there will be an application in there for you to join that association. That is your association for administrators. A lot of these other associations are they are focused on facilities. They are the owners associations. They're associations of owners. And this is the professional association for administrators, and you really probably should get involved with that. So 1013-1A, there's that. 1013-1D on page 63 in my book says licensees shall place a copy of the Administrative Code of Ethics approved by the board in a conspicuous location in a public area and in the place of business requiring such license. We do give you one of those when you get your license. 13.2 F and G says that F is what it says that you have to put your license up if you're the administrator of record. So if you're the administrator of record, you have to display your license and the code of ethics. And when I say display your license, it can be a copy. Most people do put up a copy of their license and you keep the original at home. It's really a good practice because you don't want to lose the original. It could happen that you lose the original at your office. So keep the original at home and put a copy up at your office. That's good enough. Paragraph G is what I've already talked about. It says each licensed certified administrator shall update their licensure record online within 15 calendar days following the change of his name, business or personal mailing address, change in employment or change in employment status online in the manner prescribed or may be prescribed by the board. And the board will assess a late fee as prescribed in 172, which I have pointed out to you. It is determined that the administrator failed to provide current contact information within that 15-day period. So that's where you find that that's a requirement. 1013.3 is where it talks about the requirements for administrators who serve as the administrator of record of 2 or more licensed long-term care facilities, and those are nursing facilities where certified assistants are employed. If you notice, I said certified assistants, not one. No certified assistant works as a certified assistant without another certified assistant at another facility because the administrator can only be administrator of record over 2 facilities where he has a certified assistant at each. And that's defined in the health department rules. We point that out to you so that you understand that. But if you're doing anything with CAAs, you need to come back and review that stuff so you're keeping yourself out of trouble. The other part of this is in chapter 15, where certified assistants is what that whole chapter is dedicated to. If you're a certified assistant, you need to get into this chapter and read it backwards and forwards. It's not that long. It's just a few pages, actually. But you really need to be familiar with all of this. Nursing home administrators, if you're ever going to use a certified assistant, and again, you can never use one. There's always at least 2, or it's not applicable. I think you could use 3, but I doubt it because the requirement is to be with a less than 120 occupied beds and within 50 miles. I can see that happening with 2. I've never seen it with 3, but it could happen, I suppose. But it's written that it could. You could do 3, 4, 5 if they're all within that criteria. That does not apply. Certified assistants are not used in res care. They're not used in assisted living, nor are they used in adult daycare. They're only used in nursing facilities. But 15-1-4B, it says there that a certified assistant shall practice only under the direct supervision and license of a licensed administrator of record, who is in charge of 2 or more licensed nursing facilities within a 50-mile radius where the total number of occupied beds does not exceed 120 and whose license is active and otherwise restricted. So I would tell you all to spend some time looking at that. If you're a certified assistant, I would tell the nursing home administrators who have certified assistants working for them that they probably need to spend a little time looking at that as well. And that pretty much covers the rules for this board, which brings us up to Title 63, which is Osbelka's governing statute. Title 63, Chapter 12, Sections 330.51 through 330.65 is where all of this resides for you. You're going to find some definitions there, including the long-term care administrator. I'm going to stop and just talk about the definition of a long-term care administrator as defined here in the statute. It says here that a long-term care administrator must devote at least 1/2 of such person's working time to on-the-job supervision of a long-term care facility. First of all, what we're talking about is that you're not, it doesn't say that you can be a 20-hour-a-week administrator. That is not what that says. That is not even close to what that says. But we have owners who try to pull the wool over your eyes and they say, I need an administrator for 20 hours. That's all I want an administrator for is for a 20-hour week. Run away. That is not what this says. And that owner is pulling the wool over your eyes or trying to, and I would run away. It says you should have direct on-the-job supervision for half your time. That does not say you only have to work 20-hour weeks. There is no administrator who works 20-hour weeks. None. Probably not too many who work 40-hour weeks, which is what that 20 hours is based off of, because a full-time is 40 hours. Most administrators are probably working 60, 70, or 80 hours in a lot of weeks, especially these days. So that's the discussion about 20 hours and what a myth that is. Don't get pulled into that myth ever, anywhere. It's a full-time job. That's why you cannot be the DON and the administrator at the same facility, because those are both full-time jobs, okay? You cannot do that. The other thing about this is you're going to see in the health department regulations that they define administrator as 1/3 of such a person's working time on the job. All right, let's talk about that for a second. First of all, if you were to see that on a test question, the test would be very specific if we ask such a question and say, according to Osbelka's statute or according to the health department rule or statute or wherever it came up, what is the standard? The reality is, what is the standard? The standard is the most strict of the two, and it is 1/2. That is the standard. However, the health department has a standard of 1/3, and they probably won't turn you in until they find that you're less than their standard of 1/3. And if you turned in for that, then you probably really didn't meet the 1/2, because 1/2 is more than 1/3. So you're probably going to end up answering that question to the board as to why you're not spending enough time in supervision in your facility. And it's probably going to show with all kinds of negligent issues that are coming up. So understand that if we ask a question, it's going to be based on it'll tell you which reg it comes from, so you need to know which one says what. And the board is more strict than the health department who does the surveys and that sort of thing. That's where they're going to be the people that discover this and report it to us. And you can think of it like this, as a speed limit is 70, but the state trooper is probably not going to pull you over at 74, but he might pull you over at 77, 78. And that's the same sort of thing. The health department knows that the speed limit is 1/2 for us, but they're going to let you go to 1/3 before they report you. But it doesn't mean that that's what the right standard is. That's I think that's one way to understand what's going on with that. Okay. 330.52 is where you see the structure of the board and the appointing authority and that sort of stuff. You probably need to be pretty familiar with that. This board is made up of 15 board members. 12 of those board members are appointed by the governor and approved with the advice and consent of the Senate. You'll read that in 330.52. So you've got 12 approved, appointed by the governor and approved by the Senate. Not the Congress, not the House of Representatives, it's the Senate. That's who does it. The other 3 members come from the Commissioner of Health, the Commissioner of Director of Department of Human Services, and the Director of Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, or their designees. And in every case, all 3 cases, I've never seen the Director or Commissioner serve in that role for himself. He's always appointed someone to sit on this board for them. So you've got 12 and 3. Now let's go back to the 12. Of the 12, 8 of them are administrators representing the different administrator types. So there are 4 administrator types and 8 positions. There are 2 each. There are 2 nursing home administrators, 2 residential care assisted living, RCAL administrators, 2 res care administrators, and 2 adult daycare administrators. That's where you get 8. The other 4 people are from the at-large public, and 2 of those 4 are required to be medical professionals. So that's the breakdown of the board and how they're required to be appointed. 330.54 is where you find that the expiration dates for your license is again defined as the 31st day of December of each year. And if we ever change our licensing to every 2 years, we will have to have it changed in the statute first, because the statute takes precedence over the rules. So we'll be looking at, that's something that's been talked about for a while, about changing that to renew more or less frequently than annually, to do it maybe once every 2 years. So that may happen, it may not, but that has to happen in the statute before it can happen in the rules. Moving right along, if you go to 330.59, you see that it says it shall be unlawful and a misdemeanor for a person to act or serve in the capacity as a long-term care administrator unless the person is the holder of a license or certification as a long-term care administrator issued in accordance with the provisions of this act. And that's the main parts of that you need to take aboard. Again, this part applies to everyone. If you're a nursing home administrator candidate, you need to review all these sections that I'm going over. This is just the first one. The rest of them are going to health department. First part of the health department will go into nursing home specific and ICFs. The next one will go into res care, assisted living, or continuum of care. That would apply to nursing home administrators and RCAL administrators. And then the next piece would go into res care only, and that would still apply to nursing home administrators, RCAL administrators, and res care administrators. And then the last piece is adult daycare, and that would be the health department statutes and rules for adult daycare. And we'll look at those as to how they apply, and that would be just the nursing home administrators and the adult daycare. So I believe that pretty much covers where we are with the board's rules, and I'll leave it at that, and we'll start over with the next section.